Hello, people who enjoy timely reviews. Here's a book that's a scant 15 years old that I said to myself, I'm going to do a review on this book because I just read it. So you might be thinking, wait, is this some kind of mistake on the date stamp? No. It's 2023, and I'm talking about a book that came out, I believe, in 2008, with stories that some of them were written in like the 1980s and most of them like the late to early 2000s. But anyway, it's Stephen King's Just After Sunset, and what I'm going to do with this particular situation is there are 13 short stories in here, and I ranked them for your enjoyment, because I thought that might be kind of a fun thing to do. So I'm going to go from the one that I thought was the worst to the one that I thought was the best, and say just a little bit about each one. I'll try to avoid major spoilers, maybe some light spoilage.
This wasn't in your original Stephen King rankings, right? You hadn't read
No, obviously I had not read this yet since I just finished reading this maybe I don't know, 5 days ago or something. So anyway, here we go. So the first story, it's not the first story on the list, but the first one on my list of the 13 is called Graduation Afternoon. Not to be confused with Graduation Day. This is a pretty short one. It's only about 10 pages. I think it's the shortest one in the book, and I did not particularly enjoy this. This is basically just like a pretty generic story. There's like a regular girl dating like a really rich guy, and the rich mom like doesn't really like it, and it's pretty silly generic stuff. And then a nuclear bomb hits, which is like the kind of story I used to write when I was like 6. I just have like random stuff happening, and then all of a sudden a nuke. And I was like, you published this? So anyway, this is awful. I called this a 1-star reading. It's on 10 pages, so like it's not like you're going to skip it. It's 10 pages, but it was just generic and generally kind of goofy. So this is the one that I thought was the least good. And the only one that I give a 1 star in this particular collection is this story. Generally, I thought this was a good collection, but not this one. All right, so the number 2 on my ranks, my second least favorite, is called Ayana. I believe that's how you pronounce it. This is 25 pages, and this one, like, a guy's dad is, like, terminally ill, and so they're sort of, like, spending time hanging out, waiting for him to die, and that part's not too bad. I mean, it's a little sad, but, like, there's some decent, like, character development stuff going on. But then there's, like, this weird miracle thing that kind of happens. I don't really want to say exactly what, in case it ruins the story.
Is
and then that,
like Miracle and like
I think so, yes. And then like the main character gets involved in like future miracles and stuff, but it's never exactly explained why. In fact, the guy's like, "Why am I doing this?" And the guy's like, I don't know. I'm like, okay, Steve, we don't know either. So yeah, it doesn't really go anywhere. It's not particularly badly written or anything. It's a story. It's a short story. Short stories sometimes are meant to just be like a blurb of an idea. That's kind of what we got. It doesn't really go anywhere. It's not dreadful. I mean, for the second worst out of 13, it's not that bad. But I give it a 2 out of 5. Meh. All right. So third on the all list is a story called Harvey's Dream. It's another pretty short one of the shorter ones. It's 15 pages. It's basically just like this older couple that don't really have much going on spark-wise anymore. Just kind of like, what are you going to do? This is what we're doing in life. It kind of blows. And the guy has like a dream about something that might happen. And it's like, ooh, is this going to come true? I mean, this is very predictable. For a 15-page story, you're like 4 pages in. You're like, I know the rest of this story already. So, it's all right. Again, it's the kind of story you've probably read a ton of times. I know I have. There was nothing particularly original or interesting about this one. Not a pile of poop, but certainly not fantastic poop. All right, so in 4th place of our list, we're still kind of in the ones I didn't really like that much. This one's called Stationary Bike. It's about 50 pages long. The pacing in this one is kind of bad. It has some decent moments, but essentially a guy goes to the doctor's office, and he's like, your cholesterol's really high, you're a little fat, you're not like in danger of like health issues yet, but if you keep on the way you're going, you're gonna have some serious trouble. So this is an opportunity for Stephen King to take a dump on fat people for a little while, which he loves to do. But the guy's like, I'm not gonna be a fat person anymore, so he gets, as the title implies, a stationary bike. But he's bored riding a stationary bike. And the guy's also an artist, because if you're not a writer, you're probably an artist. and he paints like this construction crew because the doctor was like, imagine your body's like a construction crew and they're having to deal with all the crap you give them and it's making them work hard for them. So he like painted a picture of like this construction crew that he imagines like in his stomach, like saving him and stuff, and it's motivating him to like get in good shape. And then sounds interesting and it's not that bad. I feel like if the pacing was a little better in this, I would have liked it more. Because it's not a bad story. The idea is like the construction crew sort of comes to life and gets pissed off that like they're losing their jobs because he gets too healthy. So they have like nothing to do with his body. So they like become like homeless and miserable and they can't pay for their fictional like children's college and stuff. It gets kind of weird, but kind of fun at the same time. This one's definitely worth the read. But I knock it down a little bit only because like it's just it's too long for this. You know, I don't mind a 50-page story, but this one feels like he's just like bumbling along like he tends to do. This was like 30. It probably would have climbed up the ranks a little bit. Again, not bad, just a little clunky. Okay, so the fifth one? Yeah. The fifth one is called A Very Tight Place. This is not a very tight story. It's 85 pages,
oh my God.
Which I
That's
think...
a novella.
Almost, which I think makes it the longest short story. There's another one that's just about the exact same. So it's about the longest one in here. This one is peculiar. I really liked parts of it, and also a lot of times I was like, why? Why is this happening? So anyway, there's these two millionaires. So, you know, right off the bat, you're kind of like, am I supposed to relate to the millionaire guys? But anyway, two millionaires, and they have like a land dispute. And one guy like killed the other guy's dog, kind of accidentally, kind of not. So they have like this big feud. But at some point, too long into the story, the millionaire B calls up millionaire A and he's like, I want to settle the land dispute. I just want to put this all behind me. And millionaire A is like, haha, perfect. So he goes to meet this guy up in this deserted area. And it's like, millionaire A, you're about to get screwed over. Don't you know anything? Apparently not. So he gets there, of course, millionaire B is like, I got a gun, jerk. You probably couldn't afford one of these because you weren't like a millionaire and stuff, even though he is. And he's like, haha, I know how I'm going to get revenge on you. So he takes the guy and he puts him in a used porta potty. Right? That's like, you know, pretty stank. It's like summertime. And he pushes it over so the door is on the floor. So he basically seals the guy into the porta potty. There's like, haha, you're dead for sure. And then he just leaves. And then the next, like, I don't know, 55 to 60 pages is like millionaire versus porta potty. It's like this huge section of him describing the various chunks of poop he's dealing with and the smell and how he's going to cry and try to get his way out of it. And like, if this was like a third of the length...
It's as long as of Mice and Men.
Yeah. Him versus the porta potty is yeah, it's about as long as half of the novel of Mice and Men. Just the porta potty section. And like... parts of it are pretty good. And like the description is good. Like if you want to like be grossed out by like a poop encrusted story, this is the one for you. But I like I got enough of this. It went on for way too long. How he gets out is not bad. Oh, spoiler, he gets out, but I mean, come on. So that's not too bad. Then the ending, of course, is really predictable. I thought he might do something a little extra with the ending there, and he just didn't bother. So yeah, again, this is one of those that like 85 pages for this particular story is about double what it probably should have been. So I could, you know, it's a story I didn't really enjoy because this went on for too long, but it had some good parts in it. Not terrible, but I kind of regret that it was this long. All right, so sixth one we got was called The New York Times at Special Bargain Rates. Long title for a short story. This one's only 12 pages. This is pretty well written, I think. It moves along pretty quick. Again, it's only 12 pages. Basically, a woman gets a phone call from her husband, but bonk-de-bank-de-bonk. How could this be? Because he died in a plane crash like 2 days ago. Oh my God. I mean, it's not really a spoiler because it's like 150 words in. You're like, okay, I see what we're doing here. Again, this is pretty much exactly what you would expect to happen with this story. It's short, it's quick, it's fine. It's not bad. I enjoyed it for what it was, but there's nothing creative here, really. But it's okay. All right, so we're at the center bit here, story 7 out of 13. This is called The Things They Left Behind. It's about 43 pages. and it's pretty obvious when he wrote this one. This is not your typical King story, in my opinion. Basically, this guy, he works at the Twin Towers. He calls out on September 11th, right? So, of course, he's not there, but his coworkers are. So, of course, all of his coworkers that he knows he's been working with, they all die in the accident. And he's kind of like, oh, man. Oh, sorry, the attack. I apologize. The attack.
It was an accident.
I'm working with a lot of material here. So, yes, the attack. Sorry. Oops. But anyway, so they all die. Of course, he gets like some survivor guilt. And he's kind of like, oh, man, why not me? And then personal items of the various people that are dead just start appearing in his apartment. And he doesn't know what to do with them. So if he tries to like throw them away, they like reappear again. And so he's like, what am I going to do here? I got to figure out what to do with these things. It's pretty decent. It's really leaning heavily on sort of like that 9/11 emotional thing that people were writing a lot of stories about at that time. It's around when he wrote it again. I think he wrote it in like 2002 or something like that, 2003. So I thought it was okay. I gave it like 3 out of 5, but I can see some people who probably like really, really like this kind of story. It was a little heavy-handed for me, but again, totally decent. I enjoyed it. Not bad. Non-traditional King, which is always nice to see a little variete. All right, so we had story 8, and much like I am to my wife, these are the better half of this book. Hey-yo! All right, anyway.
You're the dark half.
Dark half sucks. That hurts. It's like a shot. It's like a double entendre shot. Anyway, this next one is the first one in the old book. So if you were to crack it open, this is the first story. Trust me, it's in there. It's called Willa. It's about 35 pages. This one's pretty decent. It starts off, you know exactly what's going on. There's like a bunch of characters just like kicking around a train station. And like, we're waiting the shuttle to come pick us up. And you're like, what? And this guy's fiance just like dips on him and like leaves. He didn't know that she left. So they're all waiting around this train station for something. And they're like, oh yeah, your fiance, Willa, she left. He's like, she just left? What up? And he's like, I'm going to go after her. I'm like, oh, you can't go after her because it's nighttime. And nighttime's when all the wolves come out. If you go out at nighttime, the wolves will eat you. So I'm like, oh, yes. Give me some nighttime wolves. This story's going to be great. But then he like yells at one wolf and it runs away. And like, the wolf part is disappointing. But as the story continues, I don't know if this is a spoiler. I don't know if I should tell it. I'm gonna leave it out because it might be a spoiler. Anyway, there's something up with this train station with these people, and so he kind of tracks down his fiance, and some stuff happens. That's all I'm gonna say because some people might consider this twisty. I don't think it's particularly twisty. You can like really see the stuff coming, but I'll leave it out just in case.
Succession.
Yeah, maybe. So anyway, it's pretty good. The ending is not that great. I was hoping for a little something else. It sort of like just goes bleh. But overall, I thought this was a good story that I liked. All right, so story 9, making our way toward the end of these 13 tales that not all of them occur just after sunset, but that's all right. So this one's called Mute. It's 33 pages. And at first I was like, I guess our main character is going to be mute, but he's not. It starts out with him in a church in a confessional. And he's like, I have to tell you about my crimes. And like, ooh, what are these crimes? And then it's like one of those 2 timeline stories where half the story he's talking to this priest, and half the story he's in his car with this hitchhiker he picks up. And the hitchhiker he picks up is deaf and mute. Or at least he claims to be. And the guy's like all pissed off because his wife like...
So it's a fake disability story?
No, they don't really explain that.
Okay.
Maybe. But anyway, so he's all mad at his wife because his wife like really screwed him over, like financially, emotionally. She's cheating on him. So she's a real piece of crap. And the guy who pitched the hitchhiker is like, look, I can complain. This hitchhiker is just sitting here like sleeping or whatever. You can't hear me anyway. So he just basically bitches about his wife and gives him all the backstory and stuff. And that's part of the story. Then he's also confessing to the priest guy the whole time. So it's a pretty interesting tale. And then as we get to the end, again, I'm not going to tell you what happens. It's a pretty good thing. I guess you could maybe say it's a bit of a twist, right? But I thought there was going to be like a secondary twist. So like after the first twisty part happens, I was like, oh, you didn't trick me. I bet this is going to happen. But it doesn't happen, which is too bad because that would have been amazing. So my second twist would have made this story fantastic. Instead, it's just pretty good. So overall, again, I like this one. on the higher end of 3 stars, I would say. Definitely worth reading. I liked it. A little disappointed in the ending. All right, so we got story 10, and I would say the last 4 stories in this collection, I really liked all of these. This one's called Rest Stop. It's 25 pages. So we have a person driving in their car. You'd never suspect it, but it's an English teacher / writer. Whew, what a shocking choice of protagonist for Stephen King. So anyway, he's driving home thinking about, man, it sure is great being an author and sometimes a teacher and all that stuff. And he goes, oh man, I got to take a leak. So he goes to this rest stop, and on his way to the bathroom, in the women's room, he hears somebody beating the hell out of some woman. And he's like, oh, what the hell do I do here? And so he sits there, he debates about what he's going to do in this. This is pretty quick, 25 pages. Good, well, because he can't see the guy. For all he knows is the guy has 300 pounds of muscle and has an axe. You know what I mean? So anyway, it's pretty good. A little bit of a character study kind of thing. Good tension. I liked it. What's interesting about this particular tale is the background on this is pretty much a real life story with Stephen King, where he came back from some, I don't know, he was pushing a book or whatever late at night, and he stopped at a rest stop, and then when he was going to the bathroom, he heard a guy yelling at some woman, and he was like, oh, what do I do here? And then they, like, I guess, didn't fight, and they left while he was debating about what to do. So he turned that into a story, which is kind of interesting. Yeah.
And meanwhile, that guy's murdered his wife somewhere.
Yes, but only the one. All right, so this is story 11. This one is simply entitled N. N, which is the signature of one of the characters when they write a letter. So this is a bit of an epistolary story for parts of it, because it's like you're going through someone's, like, he's a psychologist, you're going through his notes and letters and journals and stuff. It's kind of cool. So this is interesting because I don't believe, or at least I can't think of him, there probably is one, a Stephen King story where he does sort of like a Lovecraftian thing. Because there's definitely some Lovecraft action going on here. It's not written like Lovecraft writes, but it's got that sort of, the plot is definitely right. Sort of, not exactly, but so it definitely has a very Lovecrafting feel to it. So basically, this woman messages her childhood friend about her brother, and her brother is dead from what's called accidental causes. But she's like, no, I feel like this is a suicide. And the brother leaves behind, the brother's a psychologist or psychotherapist, psychiatrist, something like that. And he leaves behind this documents and all the data on this subject he was working with, N. And he says the message, burn this. Like, don't read this, burn this. But of course, she sends it to her friend, and she's like, he says burn. If you burn it, that's fine. But if you look at it, you know, I get it. And of course, it's 80 pages, so he's looking at it. And it's just this breakdown about this guy who sort of went to this place where they grew up that I think is, I forget where it's set. I think it's set somewhere near, like, where I've been. But I forget where it is. But anyway, and I don't want to give away too much, but like these sort of weird circumstances start happening. It's like, wait, is he imagining these things? Or are these things real? And he gets very intense, and sort of this gets sort of passed back and forth, and sort of, I don't want to, again, it's obvious where it's going. It's pretty predictable, but still really fun. And I'd never seen a Stephen King kind of Lovecraft story before. So definitely one of the better ones in the collection. All right, so story number 12 out of 13. These last two, obviously my favorites. I really, really enjoyed both of these. This one's called The Cat from Hell. 22 pages. He wrote this one a long time ago. I don't remember exactly when he wrote it, but I think it was in like the late 80s or something. This is a very old story by his, and you can kind of tell by him. You can kind of tell because it's got that kind of old, tense description going on that like he used to be really great at. So basically there's an old man, and he used to live with 3 other people, but they're all dead. And this hitman, he calls in this hitman basically to take care of his problem. And his problem is this cat. He's like, I want you to assassinate this cat. And as he's talking about the cat's like contentedly like purring on the dude's lap. And the guy's like, this cat? And he's like, yeah, don't let his adorableness fool you. He's a killer. He's killed 3 people already. So anyway, this story's great. If you've ever seen like the movie Mouse Hunt, or know that story, The Cat Came Back, it's very much like a merging of those two things. Like, it's not really that funny, but it still feels kind of funny in parts, but very enjoyable. It was great. 22 pages of glee. As a fan of cats, I heavily approve of this story. Spoiler, the cat does not get assassinated. All right, and Lucky 13. Again, I could interchange this one with the last one, but I'm going to call this one my favorite story here. This one's called The Gingerbread Girl. This is 85 pages, tied for right around the longest book in the story, but this one's, I think, worth the 85 pages, even for a short story. So it starts off where this young married couple's baby is born, but it's born like stillborn, and so they're all miserable about that. And the mother, to sort of compensate for this, she starts taking up running, and she becomes like an extremely dedicated runner. And she's like, all she wants to do is run like all the time, and sort of that puts some pressure on her relationship. So they kind of like trial separation. And she's like, well, where am I gonna go to get over this part of my like dead child and like separate with my husband? She's all stressed out and stuff. So her dad lets her use their small kind of vacation home in like this rich vacation area. And you might notice that Stephen King's now added a bunch of stories to his repertoire, which sort of like these rich vacation area houses, because obviously he's spending some time in Florida lately in a rich person vacation area. So he started writing a bunch of stories about it. But anyway, so this girl goes here, and at first I was like, oh no. We're just going to hear about this girl running and meeting all the people in this small town for the rest of this story. Ugh. But that's not what happens. That happens for a little bit. And there's an extremely sudden and drastic tone shift. Like, this story does not go at all where it seemed like it was going to go for like the first 20 pages. It was like a story of like depression and like reestablishing yourself as a person, blah, blah, blah. But then suddenly she gets kidnapped by one of the random rich dudes who like imprisons her in this basement. And then it becomes like an escape action thriller, which is kind of weird and not what I expected. But it's really good. It's intense. It's got sort of like I feel like it's got a lot of misery to it. So if you read the book Misery, there's a few sections in that book where like there's this really intense, time-sensitive, like escape kind of plot moments that are great. There's some of those in here that are really enjoyable. It might go on a little bit too long, and some of it's like slightly goofy at times. But overall, it's really enjoyable and fun for like a suddenly escapey action story. Ending is predictable, but still satisfying, I felt like. So even though like what's going to happen, it was still quite enjoyable regardless. Overall, very fun story. Really liked it. Those last two stories were great. And overall, for a book, again, that came out, I think, in 2008, where like a lot of Stephen King stuff, 10 years before this, 10 years after this, were not so great. This one I thought overall was really good. I really liked this collection. Only one story that I really didn't like, and a whole bunch that I enjoyed a decent amount, and at least a couple that I thought were fantastic. So if you're like, hey, I want to read a Stephen King short story collection, and I haven't read any for a while, I would go ahead and give this sucker a shot. I thought it was definitely worth my time. About 540 or so odd pages in total for 13 Tales of Delight. All right, so there you go. That's this review and ranking of Stephen King short stories. Did you have one you liked the most? Did you have one you hated the most? Do you think I'm an idiot and I don't actually know how to read? Maybe you're right. Only time will tell. Boop.